And there are also mounting fears of an escalation in the conflict on Israel's border with Lebanon. Lebanese officials say 4 civilians, including 3 children, have been killed in an Israeli airstrike near the southern town of Aynata. The Israeli military says it is examining the incident. Lebanon's Hezbollah militant group has responded by firing rockets at the northern Israeli town of Kiryat Shmona. Let's speak to DW's Special Correspondent Amien Essif, joining me from the Lebanese capital, Beirut. Amien, Lebanese officials have said that 4 Lebanese civilians have been killed in an Israeli airstrike. What more can you tell us?
Well, authorities in Lebanon say that this was a strike from an Israeli drone. It seems like it was a direct hit on this car that was carrying 3 young girls aged 10, 12, and 14, their mother and their grandmother. The grandmother also died, as well as these 3 children. The mother was severely injured, but she was pulled alive from the car by her brother. He was a Lebanese journalist who was driving in front of that car in a sort of caravan. He said that there was no other possible targets for Israel in the area, and a lot of Lebanese are speculating that he was himself the target. Israel has also killed a Lebanese journalist very early on in this latest conflict. Hezbollah, the militant group, which is backed by Iran and basically controls the south of Lebanon, said that it has retaliated, killing 1 Israeli, but no word yet if that is a civilian or military personnel.
Now, these incidents sound certain to raise tensions. Are there signs of further escalation in the conflict on Israel's border with Lebanon?
Well, the Lebanese government seems to be going the official route. They said they're lodging an urgent complaint to the UN against this strike on a civilian target by the Israeli military. But don't forget that it's not the Lebanese government that has control in the south, but rather Hezbollah, which is the largest party, but it's backed by Iran and operates somewhat autonomously in the region there. They said that Israel has to pay the price for this attack, and we have to see in the next few days what exactly they mean by that. Now, the leader of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, said last week basically that he doesn't intend to change the status quo, that all of the actions there are being calculated. But one wild card here is the presence of Hamas in Lebanon. Now, Hamas is a Palestinian party. It doesn't have that much power in Lebanon, but there are 250,000 Palestinian refugees living in Lebanon. And since the terror attacks on October 7th and the resulting attack on Gaza, which has killed thousands of civilians, Hamas has started to gain a lot more popularity among these Palestinians. I went to one of the large refugee camps here just south of Beirut, and you can hear what they told me.
Crossing into Bourj al-Barajneh Palestinian refugee camp, giants of the Palestinian cause watch over you. Some say that 20,000 people live here in less than 2 square kilometers. That would make it as dense as Gaza City. The similarities between the 2 places are hard to miss. Makeshift blockhouses, narrow streets, UN facilities providing aid. Every street here is strung with this mass of wires and water pipes. They were actually built by the residents themselves with the help of aid organizations. That's because this camp isn't serviced or inspected by Lebanese authorities. It's kind of a world apart, a little Palestine, where residents are basically sitting and waiting to go back to their original homelands. Deep inside the maze of streets, we meet an elderly woman who was born in Tarshiya in present-day Israel, but was forced to flee in 1948 when she was just 2 years old. She's lived her whole life as a refugee. In recent weeks, she's done little but watch the news and grieve.
I've been watching from the first day. Of course I have. It's my family and my friends. Of course I've been watching, my dear. May Mohammed protect all of the people of Gaza. And with the help of Mohammed, we'll all return to our country.
The militant group Hamas has never had much of a foothold here in Bourj al-Barajneh, but its name has appeared scribbled on walls in recent weeks. Some people celebrated the Hamas terror attacks on October 7th in these streets. Now they're furious at the Israeli response. Imad was born here. He got a degree in business management in Beirut, but because he's a refugee, he's barred from most jobs outside the camp. So he sells flavored ice from a motorbike.
I do feel a very strong connection with Gaza. I feel like one of them. When I see a building collapsing or a child dying, I get goosebumps and I feel anxious and angry about it. So if a war starts in Lebanon, I would join the resistance to defend Palestine. My family and my kids are not better than the ones dying in Gaza.
I ask him if he condones Hamas's killing of over 1,000 Israeli civilians in October. He denies without evidence that they were the targets of the attacks. There's an increase in violent anti-Israel sentiment here as the news of civilian deaths in Gaza plays on TVs across the camp. But at the same time, there's a growing fear of what might happen if Hamas and its allies were to draw Israel into a wider war.
The Palestinian guys, if you see here in the camp, like my brother or my men cousins, they are able to have a gun and go to the borders to kill the Israeli, and this is our land and we want it back.
Do you think that it's wise to not provoke Israel so that Lebanon stays out of the war?
As you see, the building in the camp, they are not well maintained. They are not, so it's one bomb. They will let the camp fall down, so I will die. So for sure, I don't want war, and I think no one in Lebanon wants war, and we don't also want peace with Israel. So that's it.
Dreading war, unwilling to accept peace. It's a contradiction that runs through this camp.
Amien, thank you for that report. And we saw there those examples of support for Hamas within that refugee camp. I'm curious whether you felt that Hamas is gaining more of a foothold in Lebanon as a result of the war.
I don't know if it is gaining a permanent foothold. That is to say that Fatah is still the dominant political power in these refugee camps. Don't forget, Fatah is a more moderate Palestinian party, secular, believes in a two-state solution. This is what Mahmoud Abbas is from. So this still remains in power there, and Hamas doesn't really have a foothold in that sense. But in terms of popularity, they've certainly grown a lot more popular since October 7th. You saw the celebrations in the streets there, and a lot of people grieving what's happening in Gaza now with the Israeli bombardments. There's been a kind of radicalization going on. You could see it playing, there's news playing on TVs in almost every corner nonstop, and they're getting a kind of filtered version of what's happened, especially on October 7th. People I talked to denied that civilians were the targets of the Hamas terror attacks because they're getting videos that don't explicitly show that. That isn't to deny that there is a certain violence, a swell up of violence in these Palestinian refugee camps. A lot of people there have the feeling that something has to change. Don't forget that we're almost in the fourth generation of refugees has been living in Lebanon as refugees, meaning they can't really work in most jobs. They're contained to these camps for 4 generations without prospects of a future. And for a lot of them, having a two-state solution or going back to their grandparents' homelands is an existential question for them. And so in a very tragic way, any kind of movement on the Palestinian-Israeli question is some kind of hope for them. And they see that in what is happening in the region right now, despite how tragic it is. So I wouldn't say that Hamas has a foothold necessarily, but certainly people are watching this and saying perhaps something is moving now, despite all the violence that is going on.
Amien, thank you so much for your insights. That's DW's correspondent Amien Essif reporting from Beirut.